a psychological interview that you're doing. You're sort of being my psychiatrist. I've watched your show a lot over the years. People break down, they start crying on the show. I said, that's never happening to me.
There's an addiction to revenge. Nobody would fault you. You can say, it ends here, it ends with me. What do you say to yourself when the crowds aren't cheering? What is the hardest, darkest moment?
I don't think I've ever said this on air before.
Last week, 12 jurors deliberated for 2 days and rendered a verdict finding Donald Trump guilty on all 34 charges of falsifying business records, leading to an unprecedented felony conviction of not only a former president, but also the front-runner nominee for the Republican Party. Donald Trump has professed his innocence and defiantly, outside the courtroom, called the trial a disgrace, rigged, and claimed the real verdict will happen when the presidential votes are counted on November 5th. I traveled to Mar-a-Lago to sit down one-on-one with President Trump for an unfiltered, no-holds-barred interview. And I promise you, no topic was off limits. But I don't endorse candidates, so I want to sit down with President Biden and Kennedy as well, because everybody needs to vote, and not just vote, but make informed votes.
It's an honor to be with you. Let me just say, it's great looking at that logo. I've seen that sucker a long time.
Yeah. You look well.
I feel good.
Do you?
I feel good. No pressure.
Yeah.
It's nice to lead a life of no pressure whatsoever. Yeah. Corruption, surrounded by corrupt judges and corrupt politicians. Other than that, there's no pressure.
You know, you and I talked the other night, and I work in trial sciences for a lot of my career, and so I have a particular interest in the dynamics of the trial setting. You're fighting this fight and standing up for the rights of due process and fighting against prosecutorial misconduct and prosecutorial abuse.
You know, it was interesting when you called the other day about doing an interview. A lot of people want to do interviews, and I don't just agree to them very easily. But I've always had great respect for you. I watch your show, some of the real good ones and some of the less intellectual ones, and that's okay too. But it's always been, you've always been very special. And I knew that you were, in some form, very much involved with trials. And I found it to be very interesting that you would take this up. It's a very important thing.
Well, I wanted to, and I know that there was some news coming out of Georgia today, there was some news coming out of Florida today, that they're stepping back from this. And
very good news.
I called for the other day, and I don't know if you saw it, but on Merritt Street Media, where I now do my show, I called for President Biden to stop all of this now. And of course, a lot of people said, oh, he can't stop it, it's a state case. Well, okay, that's an explanation for stupid people, but for people that understand how this works behind the scenes and all, I say the same thing. They need to stop this. They need to stop pursuing you. Since you started your campaign in 2015 to run for office, there have been so many attempts to get you off the board even before you started your campaign. Then once you were in office, 2 impeachment opportunities, they changed the rules to try to make it high crimes and misdemeanors if there were business conflicts, and in this case,
never ends.
It seems to be never ending, and that is a distraction to you. And I really wonder how that affects you. What do you say to yourself about that? Because it seems to never be ending.
It's a never-ending thing. There's a term that I know you've heard many times. It's called Trump derangement syndrome, and nobody's ever seen anything like it. In one way, we drive them totally crazy because we're doing the right thing. You wonder, why would somebody want to have open borders where people are coming in from jails, prisons, where they're coming in from mental institutions, and as you know better than anyone else, they're coming in, they're releasing the people all over the world, not just South America, from mental institutions and jails and prisons, and they're terrorists coming in by the thousands. They're pouring into our country. And who would allow this? You know, it's common sense, not a conservative thing. If they would devote that same skill and talent to making America great again, it would really be a wonderful thing. But in the meantime, we're beating them. You know, you mentioned I got impeached twice, and I won twice very easily, very quickly. We had great support from the Republican Party. I have all these cases. All my life, I didn't have any problem. And all of a sudden, within a matter of months, I end up with 4 cases. Now, of course, it's from the White House and the Department of Justice. They totally control the state case. In fact, I'm not allowed to even be talking about certain aspects of it because I have a gag order. Think of it. I'm the Republican nominee. I was the president, and I'm leading the current Democrat by a lot. And I have a gag order from a local judge that was appointed by the Democrat Party. A local judge. He's a local person, and he is appointed. And he put a gag order on me.
While you're
Nobody's ever
campaigning.
seen anything like it.
While you're campaigning.
While I'm campaigning, like you just mentioned a question that I'm not allowed to talk about.
Right.
Can you imagine? I'm the Republican nominee, and I'm not allowed to talk because a local judge from New York, appointed by Democrats, said I can't talk about it. It's so unfair. And then he gives a jury charge. Nobody's ever heard of a charge like this. He gave instructions to the jury. And by the way, the jury happened to be in a location that was almost no Republicans. You understand that?
Yeah, it's 87-13 in the last two elections, Republican. And I know you can't talk about it. I'm not under a gag order. I do know that the number 3 person in the Department of Justice took a pay cut and went down in stature to go to a state job and become one of the lead prosecutors in this case. But yet they say, hey, Dr. Phil, why are you saying that President Biden needs to stop all of this? It's a state case. That's exactly why I'm saying it. Don't be naive, people. Understand that there's a power play going on here.
It's controlled by the White House and the DOJ, 100%.
You know, Gerard Baker wrote in Wall Street Journal today, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, what do we say to those people that are rejoicing over reducing law to the status of a weapon in the hands of the dominant political power? Because that's what's happening right now. It's become a weapon. And that's not what it's intended for. That's not what we need to be doing. I mean, let's let the people decide these, right?
That's right. That was a very good statement in the Wall Street Journal. I read that this morning. And it's so true. I mean, it's so accurate. They've weaponized to a level. They are trying to affect the election by demeaning, hurting in any form. And by the way, I think after the election, the hatred's great enough that they'll go, but with much less enthusiasm. This is about November 5th, which I think is going to be the most important day in the history of our country. If we don't turn this around, we're not going to have a country left anymore.
Well, we're a country of laws, right? I mean, and that's what's made us so orderly. That's what's allowed us to progress forward. And there's something that are called hornbook laws or black letter law that is just, these things have just been around so long. And these were violated in your case, one right after the other. For example, you don't let someone that has been charged in the same case as someone else, and they made a plea deal and said, okay, I'm guilty of doing this because they were intimidated into doing it. The lawyer in your case, we don't even need to speak his name, he bartered around out from under 65 years, looking at 65 years of imprisonment down to 3 years and 2 years on this case and a tax case. So went from 65 years down to 5 years in exchange for giving them testimony against you. That's not supposed to come in, but it did. Pecker making a deal, a non-prosecution agreement. That's not supposed to come in, but it did. That got into the jury box. They got to hear all of that. And so they say, well, you know, if we're not down here for the reasons they're saying, then we need an alternative explanation, which they're not allowed to get, because your expert witness that was going to come in and say, as a former chairman of the Election Commission, was going to say this was looked at, there's no issues here. They didn't allow that person to talk, to testify. And I'm looking at this saying, how is the jury supposed to solve this problem if they don't have all the pieces to the puzzle?
They wouldn't listen to him. They wouldn't talk to him. They didn't want to hear his testimony. They knew what he was going to say. He was going to say it was 100%. And very importantly, when they tell somebody, you're going to jail for 15 years unless you say bad things about this guy named Trump, okay? Now, in all fairness, we know a lot of great people, but you don't know too many that would say, I'm not going to do what they want.
Yeah.
He goes up to somebody and they say, Dr. Phil, you're going to jail for 15 years unless you say bad things about Trump. And if you say the bad things, you're not going to jail at all. In fact, we're going to make you a hero. Or you're going to go for 3 months, or you're going to go for a short period of time. How many people are there that say, you know, I'm not going to do that? There have been people.
Yeah, that's right.
And those are, in my opinion, these are great people. What they've done to people that work for me is incredible. Yeah. Incredible. The threats the taking of a gentleman who's been with me for years and telling me he's going to jail for 15 years unless they say, and he went back to jail a second time. I guess they didn't want him to testify. I don't know what happened exactly, but the threats that they made to this man, they've destroyed his life. These are fascists. You know, these are really bad people, Phil. But who's going to do it? You're going to jail for 15 years, or you're going to go for 30 days or 40 days, or you're going to go for no time, but you have to say bad things about Trump.
Yeah, and that's intimidation. And some of these people, you look at their age, you look at their health, and for some of it could be a death sentence. And so they make a deal, and that's what I talk about. That's what I mean when I say prosecutorial abuse. Did anyone ever approach you and try to get you to make a deal, drop out of the race, make a deal here, we'll leave you alone?
No, they didn't, but I believe they would. If I would have offered that up, I think they know me well enough. I really do. But, if I didn't run, as an example, I would have never had any of these lawsuits. How about I get prosecuted on a person that I have no idea who she is? I have no idea who she is. I have to pay $91 million. And that judge was just as bad, just as corrupt, a corrupt judge. I have to pay $91 million to a woman. I have no idea who she is. She wrote a book and she made a statement in the book. And you know that case. That case is a disaster. And then but I have no idea who she is. And they said I did things. These people are corrupt and in some cases incompetent, but it's such an honor to have somebody like you see it and see it so clearly. And I knew that, I remember that years ago you were helping Oprah out, and she was sued and it was having a big impact on her.
Mad cow.
And I thought it was great. And Oprah used to really like me. She was here many times. Yeah. She loved my key lime pie. We have key lime pie, and she loved a lot of things about Mar-a-Lago. Yeah. And Roger King, as you know.
Yeah, we were here for the funeral for Roger King.
Correct, long time ago. It's the only funeral we've ever had at Mar-a-Lago. I said, maybe we can do a new business here. Yeah. We'll operate as a funeral parlor. But it was one of the most beautiful funerals in the ballroom behind us. And he was a great guy. And Oprah's terrific. But once I announced I was running, and I said, we have to have strong borders, we have to have this, we have to have that, we've sort of lost contact, as the expression goes. But I remember when you were very much involved in helping Oprah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's been time and time again. And that was another black letter law that you just don't do. The judge tells you, okay, you can testify, but I'm going to allow them to ask you about this person that you now owe $91 million. I'm going to allow them to ask you about this other case. I'm going to allow them to ask you about 10 contempt citations that I've given you. I'm going to allow them to ask about all that stuff. What does any of that have to do with the matters at hand? And the answer is zero. That gets into the jury box if you take the witness stand. Again, that is black letter law. You can't let in unrelated things that have more prejudicial impact than probative nature. That just doesn't happen, but it happened 1, 2, 3 things right in a row. That's right. And that gets into the jury box.
If you testify, they'll be able to ask you about all these different things. And by the way, if you say one thing if you say it was a beautiful day, as I remember it, and it was raining out, we're going to indict you for perjury.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I have a lot of lawyers that are friends and this and that. I had probably 25 guys over the course of a couple of months say, whatever you do, don't testify, because you'll say something that's a little bit off and you will be indicted for lying, for perjury. These are evil people. These are sick, evil people.
Oh, I would have thrown myself in front of your car to keep you from testifying.
No, I know. I wanted to so badly. And by the way, I would have loved to have testified about those things because it was so corrupt and so horrible. But he wouldn't have allowed me to answer the questions properly. No. And so I would have loved to have testified. I wanted to. I'm telling you, they had to hold me back. But every lawyer that came, they'd always start to say, by the way, I'm afraid of yours, don't testify. And they saw what he was doing. They can ask you about like anything. They can do nothing to do with this case. All of these outside things. And it was really an unfair trial. There's a very brilliant judge in Florida that's holding the government. It looks like, she's looking into what happened because, they raided Mar-a-Lago. And they took stuff out by the satchel. I mean, they took bags and bags of stuff. And I said, what are they taking? Are they saying what they're taking? Because they can add things. They can add the nuclear codes in there. They say, hey, here are the nuclear codes. And this was all stuff that under the Presidential Records Act, I'm allowed to do. By the way, Biden was totally exonerated. Now, I'm not sure I want that kind of an exoneration. They basically said he's incompetent to stand trial, but he could be president. Think of that. He's not sharp enough, got no memory, got no this, got no that. He's incompetent. Basically, they're saying he can't stand trial due to incompetence, but he can run for president. What's going on?
Yeah.
What are we missing here?
Yeah, it makes everybody uncomfortable about that state of affairs. And what I was concerned about with everything that happened in this New York trial is one of the big myths is that the burden of proof lies with the prosecution. Mm-hmm. That is the law. But I can tell you, after years and years and years of trial, the truth is that the jury sits there and says, I'm looking at all this, and if we're not down here for the reason they say we're down here, somebody needs to give me an alternative explanation of why we are down here. So if we're not down here because of what the prosecutors are telling us, then what's the alternative story? What's the alternative explanation? And when you get muzzled in the way that this judge muzzled this case, they're sitting there saying, what's the rest of the story? You're not allowed to testify because you're in jeopardy if you do. They let all of this other stuff in that should never get into the jury box. And so, the scales get tipped. And it gets very, very difficult to get even one juror because there's not an alternative story that if you could tell without being in peril, if you can tell without being intimidated, it would be a very different situation. The burden legally is on the prosecution, but logically with the jury—
You're guilty until proven innocent.
That's exactly the truth.
I can tell you, that's the truth with me.
That's how it plays out. And I did a focus group about this when I did a show on this on Merritt Street, and I had 250 people in, did a focus group, and I said, and overwhelmingly the people were in your favor. But I found those that had questions, and I said, what is your question? They said, where there's smoke, there's fire. Yeah. I didn't hear the other part of it.
I'm sitting here, and you've asked me indirectly a couple of questions. They're so simple to answer. I'd love to. Yeah. And yet if I do, this guy's he's willing to throw you in jail, okay? This is an appointed judge, acting. He's an acting judge, appointed. And he's willing to throw you, and he's so conflicted. It's so sad. But you do things for your country. And I view it, I think if my country weren't involved, because people say, the two questions, I get these questions from very tough guys like you, the biggest guys on Wall Street, people that you read about, but they're tough men and women. But I have the question asked often is number one question I get, how do you stand it? How do you do it? How do you get up in the morning and put your clothing on and go to work? I do get that because people don't envy it. And the other one I get is, will they do it again? Meaning, will they cheat? Will they do it again? Will it happen again?
Well, I have a different question than that how question. My question is why. I understand how. I know you got a thick skin. You're not one of those people that's afflicted with the need to be loved by strangers. I get that.
I think that's true.
My question is not how do you do it. My question is why do you do it? Why do you, 'cause let's face it. I mean, you're a billionaire. You got a great family. You're a very dedicated father. People may not see this in you a lot because you keep that kind of private. But my question to you is why do you subject yourself to this?
So there's a movement in this country. It's called MAGA. And Biden's always fighting it. We will stop MAGA. MAGA is Make America Great Again. And we were doing, I had an administration that was a tremendous success. Even enemies, we had the greatest economy in history. We had the best job numbers in history. That's why I'm doing so well with the black and Hispanic vote. They had the best job numbers they've ever had. We were doing things that were incredible. And I was going through Russia hoax. I was going through the impeachment stuff, all of that. And, in one way, I jokingly said, somebody said, can you imagine what he could have done? Because I had one of the most successful presidencies. And yet I was constantly fighting off the radical left lunatics. They are deranged. They are. It's like a derangement syndrome. But I actually said, maybe in some ways I did better because I showed something, but maybe if I had too much time on my hands, it would have gone too far and the administration wouldn't have been as successful as it was. When you look at our job numbers, I rebuilt the military, largest tax cuts ever. Largest tax cuts, bigger than the Reagan tax cuts.
But higher
largest
revenue.
regulation cuts ever.
I'm staying with my why question because look at this. Everybody calls it inflation, but affordability. When we talk about gasoline, under your administration, average $2.57 a gallon. Under Biden, $3.61, 40% more. Under your administration, homes, average $320,000. Under the Biden administration, 31% more, $420,000. Under your administration, interest rates, 3.8 average. Under the Biden administration, 39% more at 5.3%. Okay, now let's look at the border. Under you, average 1.7 million border crossings. Their official number is 6.4. That's from Homeland Security. It's actually about 13 million because I know I've been to the border. I've talked to the border guards down there, Brandon Judd. I've talked to Jason Jones. I've talked to the people that actually know the numbers. They say it's between 10 and 13 million. So my point is when you look at the actual numbers, plus the things you just talked about, lower taxes, higher tax revenue, you look at that and you would say, my God, he should be running unopposed. I mean, why?
And these numbers, I appreciate it, and these numbers are really, I don't know how many.
Very conservative.
As an example, I had gasoline down to $1.87, not $2.57. Right. It's now almost at $4. It's going to be at $5 very shortly. Right. It's going way up.
I took very conservative numbers so people couldn't argue.
Well, interest rates, I was at 2.6%. They have 3.8. And now they're at 9%, 10%, you can't get money. So, we did a great job.
Okay, so here's the question. Most people look at this from the standpoint of, they ask themselves the question, is my life better under this administration or is it better under this administration? My quality of life, my ability to pay for my children's lunches, tennis shoes, getting them to the dentist, getting all of the different things that go to quality of life. And when we look at that, it's not even a close call.
That's right.
So why are people so energized against President Donald J. Trump?
Well, I think it's, to a certain extent, it's habit, not necessarily against me. I think Democrats vote out of habit. I'll give you an example. I was the best president for Israel ever. Golan Heights, all of the things I did for Israel, and yet I get less than 50% of the votes. It's shocking to me. And Biden's a disaster, and Obama was a disaster for Israel with the Iran nuclear deal that he approved, all the, which was basically a path toward nuclear weapons. And I say, why? And I say, it's habit. They're used to voting for Democrats. Black people are used to voting for Democrats, but they're coming off it. They're smart. They're seeing what's happened. They're seeing criminal justice reform. They're seeing the black colleges and universities. I got it funded. They're seeing all of the things that I've done. Nobody could do what I did. I say that, and people sometimes smile, but it's actually true. I'm the best president for black people since Abraham Lincoln. And black people are seeing that, and we have numbers now that as a Republican, I don't think anybody's ever had. Well, I hope they come out and vote for me.
I was just in Jerusalem and interviewed Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah.
He said that the Abraham Accords, which you achieved, he said he didn't have the words to describe what it presented for Israel in terms of security, in terms of the ability to bring about peace and stability to that region.
It's very nice, by the way, that you say that. And by the way, great for the Arab community also. It was great for both.
Yeah,
and they're working so well. The only problem is we had 4 countries sign, real leaders. I would have had everybody signed up. I would have had Iran signed up. People laugh when I say that. Iran was broke. I said, anybody buys from Iran, you can't do business with the U.S. Iran was broke. They were down to almost no money. They had no money to fund Hamas or Hezbollah. They had no money. They were broke. They would have made a deal within a week after the election. That result was very dangerous for our country. But we did great things, and I think that's what people see. People want to go back to where we were.
You had high-level appointee positions that you didn't fill,
Right.
and thousands more mid-level positions that you didn't fill, and generated over $4 trillion in tax revenue for the first time ever.
That's right.
With tax cuts, lower tax rates, higher tax
It
revenues.
brought business into the country.
So why are people so energized against you? Are you getting out messaged?
I think, no, I really believe it's 100 years. As an example, with African Americans, for 100 years, the Democrats have run the cities. 100 years. I used to say 50. They said, you're wrong. I said, you have to be kidding. It's 100 years. It's a habit. They get used to it. But they're learning that habit's being broken in a lot of different ways. I also think you have a fake news that doesn't report it the way they should be reporting it. Look, the news has been proven to be totally fake. And it's 95% on the other side. That's the thing I don't understand. Why do people want open borders where millions of people have come into our country, and you see what's happening to the crime rate? You know, a stat came out the other day that's scary. In Venezuela, Caracas, different cities, they've moved many of these criminals out into the United States and now happily in a location near you, right near your house.
Yeah. Venezuela, the Congo, they're emptying their prisons.
The Congo, we have many, many people coming out of the prisons of the Congo. But the prison populations are way down all over the world. Nobody wants to talk about it. Prison population and mental institutions, something you deal with a lot. You know more about a mental institution than I do. That's your world. It's what you do better than anybody as far as I'm concerned. You know the population of mental institutions is way down because they've moved a lot of the most seriously ill people into our country. And Venezuela just announced that they're 72% down in crime from 2 years ago. Think of that. Because they moved their, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to realize they moved their prisoners out, but they moved their gangs. All the gang members are now in the United States, happily living in the United States. The United States of America has become a dumping ground because of a very mentally deficient president. And it's not him. I don't believe it's him. I do think he knows what's going on. I think he's sort of an evil guy, but he's not at the top of his game, and he never was very good at it. If you look at his foreign policy for years and years and years, you look at how bad he was on the crime bill in the 1990s, how he's been bad at everything, and he got lucky. Look, he ran 3 or 4 times when he would be, let's say, in normal shape, in good shape. He failed. He got it when shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be here. And he's dealing with President Xi, who I know very well. And he's dealing with Putin, who I know very well. And he's dealing with all of these leaders of these countries that they don't like the United States. They don't like what it represents. And they are at the top of their game. They are vicious. They love their country, or they want success. You define it any way you want. We've become a failing nation. We're a nation that's in tremendous trouble. We have months to go, we have somebody negotiating for us and dealing for us who is not up to par. He's not, and I'm not even saying now, I think 25 years ago he wasn't up to par, but he's dealing with President Xi of China. He's dealing with President Putin of Russia. He's dealing with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. He's dealing with very tough people that really are at the top of their game. I know them all. I know many more than that. And our country's in tremendous danger of World War III. Our country's, you look at what's going on with Ukraine now, you see what's happening, where they're talking about nuclear. They're bringing out the N-word, as I say, and they're talking about nuclear weapons, and they're talking about things that were never, in my White House, nobody ever uttered the word nuclear. Nuclear is a very bad word because of the power of weaponry. And we have a man that should not be dealing, and we're going to end up in a nuclear war. We're going to end up in World War III with this guy. And if the 5 months is a long time. We have 5 months to go before the election. Now it's even a little bit less. It's getting to be very close. Remember, you have early voting in September 22nd. Pennsylvania goes September 22nd. Yeah. So it's really less, quite a bit less. But I really believe it's a very dangerous time because I think they're making moves. They love him as our president. They don't respect him. They think he's weak and incompetent. Now, one thing I'll say, he's surrounded by a lot of fascists and communists, but a lot of fascists, and they're young and they're smart, and that's who's running our country.
Well, let me ask you something then. Let's assume that you inherit a situation where American bombs are being used inside of Russia. Let's assume that you inherit that. We could wind up with World War III if we're not there already and it just hasn't been labeled yet.
We've never been so close to World War III as we are right now.
There could be 100,000 or more potential terrorists on American soil right now today, given what's happened at the southern border.
Correct.
And we do have Venezuela, Congo, others that are emptying their prisons of their most dangerous criminals with one caveat: we'll let you out, but you go to the United States.
I believe every country is doing it.
Yeah. And it's,
By the way, if you were the head of a country,
well,
you'd be the first one to do it. I know you. You'd say, what? Let's get rid of these. You know the money they save and the danger they save?
And look at this map that I did a show about this. The red is where Chinese government has funded buying major farmland.
Yeah.
And then superimposed on that are some of our most strategic military bases.
Yeah.
And you can see there's
surrounding.
There's Dugway Proving Ground. That's military equipment, biological, chemical weapons. They're surrounding it. Utah Test Training Range, the largest supersonic authorized restricted airspace in the United States. Whiteman Air Force Base, B-2 Spirit Stealth Bomber Base, missile drone operations, MQ-9 Reaper, Global Strike Command 3, Air Force, entire Bomber Force Nuclear Command, Control, and Communications. Fort Liberty, Airborne Special Operations Forces, Rapid Deployment. We've allowed them to come in and buy up agricultural land, wind farms, no wind, no blades on some of the towers, but they're surrounding our military bases.
Right.
We've allowed that to take place. You may come in and inherit all of this, and it may get worse over the next 5 months.
It will.
What are you going to do about that?
Well, first of all, you mentioned a thing, Fort Liberty. Used to be Fort Bragg. We won world wars from Fort Bragg.
Yes.
And they changed the name. And I don't even want to say that they spent $37 million in doing it, because that's not the most important thing, but that's a lot of money. You know,
It's pretty disgusting.
Now, I will say this. We want to let people come in and invest in our country at the same time.
Of course.
We want them to come and invest. We don't want to make it so impossible. We have to be careful. And this is a lot of land. What disturbs me as much, because we don't want to, say we're not going to let anyone come in and invest. That would be a bad thing. You know, when I was
But they don't
young,
need to buy around our...
No, there seems to be a lot of activity around those nuclear sites, to put it mildly. But the thing, when you mention Fort Liberty, I remember that battle. As soon as I got out, they changed it. But they changed many names, almost all of them. They changed the names of these forts, where we won 2 world wars and plenty of other things. And there's a great anger about that.
Well, as you know, they call it presentism. What they do is they take today's cultural standards and apply it to people's conduct 100 years ago, as though 100 years ago they were supposed to predict what the standards were going to be 100 years in the future and behave the way things were going to be 100 years in the future. You can't do that. It's like you drive through a neighborhood when the speed limit is 20, then they come and change it to 10 and say, I'm going to give you a retroactive ticket. And that's what they're doing. They're holding these people to the standards of today's mores and folkways based on how they behaved back in that time. It's called presentism. And so they say, oh no, we've got to take these statues down. We've got to change these names because they were behaving in ways that we wouldn't accept today. Well, but it was accepted back then. I'm not saying it's our brightest hour. I'm not saying it's our most shining time. But these people also did great things, along with things that we may not be proud of today, but that's who they were at the time.
And it's never, if you know these people, because it's a group of people, and they don't represent the big majority, okay? They don't represent, but it's never good enough. No matter what you do.
No, I call it tyranny of the fringe.
Yeah, it's never good enough. You could do all the name changes, all of a sudden they'll find that's a problem. So, in different parts of the country.
If you inherit bombs in Russia and you have to deal with Putin, if you inherit terrorists on our soil that could attack our energy grid, how do you deal with that?
I will deal with it, and I'll get the war in Ukraine settled and done. by the time I get to office, as president-elect, I will get it done. As president-elect, you have great power. I was able to do great deals from the time I got elected in 2016. I was able to do great deals from the time I got elected to the time I got to office in that little, because you have great power there. You need the power of the presidency to do it. I'm going to get the war in Ukraine, if it's not done by that time. Now, it looks like it's getting worse. They're taking weapons now where they can shoot deep into Russia. Where is this going? Here's the problem. With Ukraine, which is right next to, we have an ocean in between. They're in for a tiny fraction of what we're in for. And I know them very well because I did it with NATO. I said, you people are delinquent. We're paying almost the entire cost of NATO. So they, excuse the word, they screw us on trade. And then on top of that, we're supposed to defend them. And I said, it doesn't work that way. But I didn't want to do that on my first. I let them know my first. When I came back, I didn't want to do it. I was in office for like 2 weeks. Then I'm saying, but I said, you're not paying your way. And I went back the second time and I said, you have to pay. Hundreds of billions of dollars was paid. They asked me one question, will you defend us against Russia if we haven't paid? I said, absolutely not. As soon as I said that, and I took a lot of heat from the fake news. The fake news went crazy when I said that because I said I won't defend them. Now you have the same thing. They paid hundreds of billions of dollars quickly. And that's where it got all the money to do what they're doing now. But remember this. So we're probably in for $250 billion. They just got $62 billion. And now I heard today that they need more money. It's going to never end. Now, you have some people that say it's not a war that should have ever been started. It would have never started if I was president. Putin would have never done it. First of all, energy went up so much that he makes money on it. When you get up to $100 a barrel, I had it at $40 a barrel, Phil. It's so different. Yeah. But it would have never happened. But now it has happened. Sometimes I hate to say almost that it would never have happened. And Israel would have never happened. The attack on October 7th would have never happened because Iran was broke. And Iran wasn't funding Hamas, and they weren't funding any of the terrorists, Hezbollah, all of them. There's like 28 of them. They had no money. They were broke. I said to China, if you buy oil from Iran, you can't do business in the United States. They didn't want to take any chance of that. Everybody stopped. And we had no terrorist attacks. And I never wanted to talk about it when I was president because I didn't want to jinx it. I wanted to get up and say, we have had no terrorist. Think of it. During my 4 years, we had no terrorist attacks. This nation is in such danger right now with the people that you're just talking about coming in. And it was interesting because I saw 29,000 Chinese people, and they showed it on camera. They look very strong. They all have their propane stoves. They all have cell phones. They look like military people.
A lot of military-age men have come in.
Yeah, they're mostly men, and they're mostly of a perfect age for military. And it's almost like, what are they doing? Building a military organization within our country with our help? We have people running our country who are grossly incompetent, headed up by a president who should never be there.
How do you unravel that?
Well, you have to do it with people, and we'll do it. I have the same thoughts as you do. A lot of common sense to this stuff. It's not, we talked about it before. Conservative, liberal, I don't care. It's common sense. We need borders. We need low taxes. We need good education. We need a strong military. I rebuilt the entire military. The entire military was rebuilt. I built a wall that was so great. And I got Mexico to give us 28,000 soldiers while I was building the wall to keep people out. We didn't have what you have today. We had the lowest day the week that I left office, and it was a sad day for this country. The week that I left office, that's when we had our lowest illegal flow of immigrants coming into our country. And all Biden had to do is leave it in place. I had a thing called Remain in Mexico. They had a Remain in Mexico. How good is that? They had catch and release in Mexico. It was so stupidly run. And all Biden had to do when he goes to the beach, he's always in the beach, right? He thinks he looks good in the bathing suit. Some advisor said, go to the beach, you look great, Joe. And he can't even lift the chair, which weighs about 6 ounces. Those chairs that you can lift. They're meant for children and old people to lift. So Joe is in the sand, and he's in the beach, and he's totally decimating everything that we built. We built the strongest border in the history of our country, and we're going to do it again. Just one little thing. In 2016, I got elected maybe because of the border. But that border was a fraction. It was nothing compared to what the border is today. And I fixed it. And you know, in 2020 when I ran, I couldn't even talk about, nobody wanted to hear about the border because I fixed it. I'll fix it again. But the border today is many, many times worse than it was in 2016.
Well, I've been to the border, and they just straight up say we're using tax dollars to send some of these children that are coming across the border into known prostitution rings, into sweatshops, because we don't have the ability to check. They're just sending them off.
You know, we have 88,000 missing children. Now, can you imagine if that were Trump that had 88,000 missing children? Yeah. 88,000, that's a Holocaust. That's as bad as I mean, think of it. These are young, very young children, and also women. They take women, and they trade women. And I had it brought down to the lowest level because I had a border that was actually strong.
And you're going to take it back to that?
Oh, we're going to bring it back, and I think then some. You know, one thing, and you know this better than anybody, that you got to know people. It's about people. If you put a great person at the head of a big agency, lots of good things happen. In my business, if I have a good super in real estate, superintendent, running one of my buildings, and if I move him to another building, sometimes you move him to another building but then that building, you need good people. And we had a lot of great people. I had some that I was very disappointed in. I was some that I was very, very disappointed in. But the one thing is that I was in Washington 17 times in my entire life. I never stayed over. That was reported by the news. I was very rarely there. I wasn't a Washington. I was a New York person. I was a builder in New York, a real estate guy. I had a wonderful company. Everything was going good. It would have been so easy to just to keep doing that. It was probably one of the most successful days of my life was the day before I announced I was running for president. Once you do this, the whole world changes. I even lost Oprah, okay? Oprah liked me so much. And, you know, I haven't spoken to her, I think, since. But she's a good person. Please give her my regards. But, you know, you do things, and my attitude is you have to do what's right. If I didn't think that I won the election by a lot, I would have never run. And I don't think I've ever said this on air before. Maybe I have. But losing the election wouldn't have been that, you know, somebody wins, somebody loses. You go on with your life. But when you lose an election that you know you won by millions of votes, if I didn't think I won the election, I would have never done it a second time because I would have lost. In other words, I would have lost. I ran because I won the election, and I know that that's what the people want. They want what you and I are talking about right now. They want strong borders, and they want good education. They want all these things that we talked about, and we're going to get it to them, and we're going to get it fast. Probably the hardest problem, the biggest problem is nuclear and the weaponry, and we have to keep out of wars and all that. But the hardest problem for our country is the millions and millions of people that have been brought into this country, that have been dropped here. Many of them should not be here. They're really, really bad people from the jails, from the places. And you know what's going to happen? You'll take 10 out, and you'll have one where it's a woman with a couple of kids, and you're going to have the news say, oh, look at this, how horrible, how hard. It's a very hard thing to do, but we have to have the largest deportation effort in the history of our country. Dwight Eisenhower had it very early on, because he was one that wanted strong borders.
But you're not against immigration.
No, I'm totally for it. But
we need it.
I think we need it desperately. But I don't want their prisoners, and I don't want their people from mental institutions, and I want people to come in legally. I want to let people come in. We need it. We do need it. We need people. But we need good people. We need people that aren't going to blow up our shopping centers and kill people.
Let me ask you two areas I want to talk to you about that's going to be different, because I'm different, so let me be different. You have a personality-driven platform, just like I do. Mine's a fraction of yours. You've taken every shot you can imagine. You've been criticized, attacked, called every name in the book. They've turned the judicial system against you, the intelligence community. 51 intelligence officers swear that this is a Russian plant, this laptop over here, right before the election. The media has turned against you, print, TV, radio, internet, in the streets. Not campaigning Donald Trump, just real Donald Trump. How do you deal with that stress in your most private moments?
So Two things. Number one, I don't like thinking about it. Out of sight, out of mind. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I don't want to think about it. Number two, I have tremendous support. I have the people's support. I think if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to handle it so easily. When a judge who has conflicts like nobody's ever had wants to put me in jail, when he puts a gag order and say, if you talk about these things, we're going to put you in jail. And I'm the Republican candidate. I was president. I'm leading the Democrat by a lot. He wants to put me in jail. I like not to think about it. It's like they say, oh, don't eat that food, don't eat this food, don't do this, don't do that. They don't really know. It might be good for you. It might not be bad. It might be good. They say it causes cancer. I say, don't talk to me about it. I don't want to hear the word. I don't want to. It's out of sight, out of mind. I think I have a very good disposition for trauma. But I have great support, Phil. The one thing is, because you mentioned lots of groups, and you're right about that, but I also have great support within the media. You know, there's a group of people in the media. You might be one of them. You're a very important force. The fact is, I've watched you so long. I just felt so confident when you called. I said, you know, otherwise, what do I have to subject myself to it for? It doesn't make sense. But I find it to be a very different and very interesting it's a psychological interview that you're doing too. You're sort of being my psychiatrist, and maybe I could use a psychiatrist every once in a while. No, it's pretty cool. But I try not to think about. I try not to go into that. And very importantly, I have tremendous support. I have support from the people. You look at the polls, and they agree with me. There's sort of a silent majority. You know, it's a term that's been used over the years, but it's a true term. I have the support of many more people than they have, if we call they the bad guys. And I think if I didn't, or if I felt I didn't, I would not be quite the same person.
You know, we all have a personal truth. You know, it's that what we believe about ourselves when we don't have our mask on, when we don't, you know, I put on a nice suit. You know, I'm going to see the president here.
Nice suit.
I want to be credible.
Looks good.
And we, you know, we put our best foot forward when we step out into the world. But we do have a personal truth that what we believe about ourselves at our most vulnerable, when nobody's looking, nobody's listening. Maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning, we wake up looking at the ceiling, thinking, what the hell am I doing? What do you say to yourselves when the crowds aren't cheering? When you're home alone, you're riding in the car, you're by yourself. What is the hardest, darkest moment that you can think of in this journey you've been on the last several years?
You have to be very strong. You're fighting off very evil forces, and they're very smart forces. There are people that control Biden, totally true. I think I know who they are largely. But there are people that control him. They're very smart, very energetic. Possibly they're real believers, you know, what their sick ideology is. But you have to be smart, and you have to have confidence. I mean, you have to have a certain confidence. The other thing is, I realize over the years, you know, I've been through a lot, great and bad. You know, I won the presidency. Everybody said, how are you going to do? How good is that? It was the most incredible evening, one of the most incredible evenings in the history of the country. Look at the celebration. I mean, it was incredible. But you also go through bad. I also I understand fully that the bad also disappears. In other words, you'll go through bad moments and it disappears. It's sort of funny because I've watched your show a lot over the years. See, I'm not ashamed to say it because some people say, oh, you watch Dr. Phil. Well, you know, your show is a very smart show. And I've watched you ask a question similar to that to some couple or and they break down, oh, they start crying on the show. I said, that's never happening to me. If that happens to me, that's the end of my political career. I think maybe people would like me better. But I'll tell you, you need strength. You have to have strength. And people don't want to see that. I've watched so many people, you break down people, they don't even know they're being broken down. But it's different.
Well, that's the last thing I want to do with you, but I do want people to know you. I want people to know every aspect of you, and I know it about myself. I know that not every time is a great day, not every time is a hard day.
I thought you led a charmed life. You never had a problem in your life, right?
Yeah. I watched you during that trial. That's not a fun time.
You know, it was an icebox. That courtroom was so cold.
Really?
And I believe it was set that way by the judge. That courtroom was freezing. You know, I'd call it the icebox, right? I say, I just sat through 4 hours, and I'm not campaigning by doing that. That's what angered me. They're taking away my voice. They're keeping me in this icebox, and they're taking away my voice. But, you know, one thing that's, you bring it up, and you haven't asked me the question yet, and I'm sure you will, although I know we've been doing this for quite a while, and it's an honor to do it. But the hardest part for me is probably my family, because it's very unfair to my family. I have a very good wife. She reads this crap. I have great kids. You know what amazed me? I gave up my salary. I didn't take salary. And it's $450,000, approximately $450,000 a year. So, you know, it's still money. It's a couple of $1 million. I never had a good story saying I did. I'm not looking for a story. What surprised me is there was a couple of stories. Who else did it? Nobody. Everybody took. I figured maybe Kennedy, it's a pretty rich family. I figured the only one that may have done it was George Washington. You know, George Washington was a very wealthy landowner. And they said the only one that may have done it is George Washington. I figured Roosevelt, maybe FDR. You know, there were some pretty rich presidents. Every president took their salary. Bush's took their salary. I didn't take my salary. I gave it up. And every month, I'd get a call from the fake news. Because, you know, you can't really give it up. You have to give it to an organization within government. You're not allowed to actually give it. So what happens, you get the check, and then you give it to Health and Human Services, or you give it to the Navy, or you give it to the Army, or something. And every month they say, did you give it? Did he give it? And when you show them that you gave it, there was no story. And it was just interesting to see. The whole system is rigged. I mean, it's just a nasty system. But the saddest is, I'll give you one quick example. I have a son, Don. He's a good kid. And he wants to help people. And they said he was involved with Russia. He knows less about Russia than that young person sitting right over there, who I'm sure knows nothing about Russia. And it was Adam Shifty Schiff, a bad guy. And he comes out of a so-called intelligence meeting, and he goes to a microphone, and there's a lot of press gathered, because this was during the Russia hoax, total hoax. It had nothing to do. 5 million phone calls, I had not one phone call to Russia. It was a hoax, and it came out that way, and it's nice, but it took 2.5 years. And by the way, it was very dangerous, because at least Putin understood it was a hoax. You know, he used to say, he thought we were crazy, to be honest with you. He thought we were crazy. But Don, so they'd say, Adam Schiff comes out and says, Donald Trump Jr. will go to jail because of what he's done with Russia. And it was Adam Schiff and Hillary Clinton and some others in the DNC that they made up a story. Think of how bad you have to be. You make up a phony story about Russia, the Russia hoax. You have the dossier, you have the whole thing, it's all fake. They paid $12 million or something for the dossier, $12 million. They gave this guy Steele a fortune to do a fake story. It's called the fake dossier, right? Mm-hmm. They go to my son, they know it's fake. It's not like they think it's real. They know it's a fake because they made it up. And they say, Donald Trump Jr. will go to jail. So I call up my son. I said, are you okay? Is there something I don't know? How bad do you have to be when you can say about a story that you made up that you know is fake, that my son is going to go to jail because of the story?
How do you deal with that as a father? Because I've had it happen to me. You've met Jordan.
Yes.
And my other son, Jay. I've had stories about them, and it infuriates me.
I called him up. I knew it wasn't true, but I said, hey, this guy, these are not stupid people. I call him Watermelon Head. He's got the thinnest neck I've ever seen, how it holds up that head. He's got a neck that's about a size 6. Very unattractive guy, both inside and outside. And people say, oh, that's such a terrible thing to say. That's okay. Very unattractive guy. Here's the thing. These are bad people. And it's not easy to deal with. You know, when you have your kids involved or your family, your wife, and you read stuff, most of it is untrue. It's just totally untrue. But think of that. They make up a story, and then they say your son's going to jail for something that they know is false. These are bad people.
Is that harder to take than when they're talking about you?
Yeah, for me it is. For me, I've become different. Maybe it would have been tougher. I think the fact that I have such unbelievable support helps me a lot. It doesn't bother me.
Has it bothered you? Has there been blowback on Barron because he's younger and more vulnerable?
It's not easy. And he's a great kid. He's a good student. He's got accepted to different colleges. He's got some of those colleges, all of a sudden they're rioting all over the place. You're saying, But he's a good boy. He's a tall boy. He's very
He is.
tall. He's very tall. And he's a great kid. He's a good-looking kid. And, he's going to be going to college. But he doesn't say it. And I think he doesn't say it because he doesn't want to hurt me. And he thinks it's possibly a hurtful conversation. But it has to affect my family. And I think that's really unfair. Because I have a very good family. I have good kids. I have a wonderful wife. I mean, it's not easy for her to read this kind of stuff. That's fake. That's fake stuff. But that's the way it is. It certainly is not a good thing. And it affects me more than it would if it were just about me. I wish it could be just about me.
How's she holding up through all of this?
I think good, but I don't think it's an easy thing for her. And I think if it wasn't good, she wouldn't want to tell me about it, to be honest with you, because, she sees that I'm fighting like hell. I'm trying to become president and make America great again. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make America great again. They put tremendous obstacles in our way, including the 20 million people that are going to be in here by the time this guy gets out. It's an election we have to win. We're not going to have a country left if we don't win this election.
Have you ever thought that the toll that it takes on your family is too much?
Maybe not in the way you expressed. That's a very interesting way of expression, actually, of that question. I haven't really. I think to a certain extent, I think that my family wants me to do it. Our country's in trouble. We could be in a world war very soon. We're going to end the problem. Think of it. We're going to end Ukraine fast. I'm going to end it fast. I know both. I know Zelensky. I know Putin very well. I'm going to get it ended. That is a horror show that's going on over there. But think of it. Why are we hundreds of billions of dollars more money? Why is this happening? Why is Europe spending a fraction of the money that we're spending? There are so many different things about that are just wrong. But my family is good. My family loves this country, and I think they feel that I do a good job. Look, we had the most successful country we've ever had during my time. We had the greatest economy in history of any country.
Do they want you to run, or do they tolerate you running?
An interesting question. Well, they tolerate it, but
They at least tolerate it.
Yeah, they tolerate it. I think they love the country. I think they think that I do a good job. I think they feel that a lot of people say that this is nobody. I get it so often, and I'm not sure it's right. They say there's nobody else that can straighten out this country. And again, Viktor Orban said just recently, he's a strong man from a very interesting country, and he knows Russia very well. He knows Zelensky very well. He knows Ukraine. But he said the only one, Hungary, he said the only one that's going to straighten this out is Trump. Because he didn't use the word respect. He used the word, they were afraid of him. I don't want to say that about these people, these other leaders. I don't want to say they were afraid. I'm not going to use that term. But let's use the word respect. They respected me. They respected me, and they respected our country. And they knew if they played games, I was going to hit the hell out of them with tariffs and lots of other things. We have a lot of weapons, not just military weapons. I rebuilt our entire military, by the way. Our entire military is rebuilt. And this person that we have leading us, if you can call the word leading with quotes, he gave away $85 billion worth of brand new military equipment in Afghanistan. In my opinion, the lowest day in the history of our country. I think probably the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country was what happened, the way we pulled out of Afghanistan. We left people behind. We had 13 soldiers who I met the parents. They're devastated, killed. Nobody ever talks about, you would talk about them. I put them right up the top. 38 soldiers who are no arms, no legs, faces just wiped out. They're trying to live, trying to live. Nobody ever talks about them. They talk about 13 dead, absolutely. But they don't talk about 38 soldiers that have been wiped out. And then hundreds of people were also killed. Hundreds of people where this madman set off a bomb. Should have never left them. They should have been in Bagram. We should have kept Bagram. Bagram is 1 hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons. We gave it up. You know who's occupying Bagram right now? China. Yeah. China. We gave the biggest Air Force base, one of the biggest runways, one of the most powerful runways, 8 foot thick of concrete, built when the dollar was very big, okay? Years ago. We gave it to the Chinese. It should have never happened. what we've done, I think that was the most embarrassing day. And I have to tell you, if that didn't happen, I don't know that Putin would have gone in. I think Putin watched that catastrophe and he said, hey, this is a great time to attack Ukraine.
You think it emboldened him?
I think so, yeah, I think so.
Let me ask you this. Right now, headlines everywhere, of course, you don't respect, but there are headlines out there that say, when you win your second term, that you are going to make the people that have come after you pay. Retribution and revenge.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this before you even respond to that. I want to play what if with you for a minute. What if when you win this election, you said, enough is enough. Too much is too much. This is a race to the bottom, and it stops here. It stops now. They've made a half a dozen or more major attempts to take you off the playing board, and you just said, it stops now. I am going to rise above this cycle of ugly. I'm not going to play this gotcha retribution game. It stops now. I'll forgive, I'll not ever forget, but I am not going to play this retribution game. I am going to put the American people first, not getting my pound of flesh first. You got to do what you got to do, but I'm going to put this country as the shining city on the hill. I am moving forward. I'm not playing the retribution game. It stops with me and it stops here. What if you took that approach?
I'm okay with that. I am. I'm okay with that. Sometimes, I'm sure in certain moments, I wouldn't be. You know, when you go through what I've been through, they spied on my campaign. You know, they spied on my campaign. Remember I announced it? They did things that people don't even talk about. And I got rid of Comey, and I got rid of a lot of people. I got rid of a lot of people. Thousands of people. At the VA, I cleaned it, 9,000 people. They were sadists, I got rid of them. But what they've done is bad. With all of that being said, we have to unite the country, Phil. The country has to be united. This country is a mess.
Every situation needs a hero. What a great opportunity for you to stop this cycle, this vicious cycle of gotcha, gotcha back, gotcha, gotcha back. Every situation needs a hero. What a great opportunity to step up and say, you know what, it stops here, it stops with me.
I think you'll be impressed. We have to unite the country. We have to save the country. That's not really saving the country. There are people that did some bad things. I know who they are and all of that. But as an example, with Hillary Clinton, I'd mention her name. Everyone's screaming. Thousands and thousands. Yeah, we just had 107,000 people show up in New Jersey. You saw that. 25,000 people showed up in the South Bronx.
In the South Bronx.
But we had Wildwood, New Jersey. 107,000 people. It was a record. They've never had that. When I mention the name Hillary in the previous to the last election, they said, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. But I would be there, and I'm trying to almost quiet them down. They were going crazy. How would it be, I win, and I lock Hillary Clinton up? The president's wife, the former president's wife, I locked her up. And how would it be if I took the Secretary of State, she was Secretary of State, and we threw her into a prison someplace? I think it was terrible. And yet now they're trying to do that with me. Think of it. I didn't want to do that. I could have done that pretty easily. She busted up her phones and she busted up her laptops and what they did, and they put BleachBit. You know what BleachBit is? It's so expensive nobody uses it because it's an acid and it wipes everything out. Could have done it really easy. Don't forget, she disobeyed a subpoena from the United States Congress, and she broke up all this machinery, all this technology after she got the subpoena. Think of it. How would it look if I took a president of the United States wife and threw her into a prison? I hated it because I wanted to bring the country together, and I largely did. And I brought it together through success because it was the most successful economy in the history of our country. Okay. Now the difference is they're trying to do it to me. And maybe you could feel differently about it, but I don't feel differently. Retribution is going to be through success. We're going to make it very successful. We have to bring the country together.
And you can do that. Because let me tell you, this revenge thing there's a lot of research, and Dr. James Kimmel at Yale has done this research and seen neurologically in the brain that there's an addiction to revenge, just like to opioid or whatever. And that even if people commit a crime and they get arrested for it, they see themselves as the victim and they want revenge against the person that arrested them. And then the person that arrested them gets hammered. So now that person says, okay, well, I'm not going to put up with that. So they go back after the criminal. Now the criminal has been victimized again. And so we get into this loop where we're addicted to it back and forth. It's got to stop. And we're better than this. We must be better than this. And you're big enough to do it. Every situation needs a hero. You can stop this. You can say,
well,
no,
I think
it ends here. It ends with me.
I think you'll be proud of the job we do. And, the word revenge is a very strong word, but maybe we have revenge through success. But that's what I'd like to see. I want to see the country survive, because this country is not going to survive like this. And really, the expression, I think it's the greatest theme ever in politics, maybe, because it's the biggest movement. We want to make America great again, and that's what we have to do. And I think you'll be very proud of the job we do.
The Pope has a book out that he's written, and he says, we are all brothers and sisters, and there must be no resentment among us. For any war to truly end, forgiveness is necessary. Otherwise, what will follow is not justice, but revenge. And that's true even in the cultural wars that we're fighting here. I think you have so much to do, you don't have time to get even. You only have time to get right.
Well, revenge does take time, I will say that.
It does.
And sometimes revenge can be justified, Phil. I have to be honest. Sometimes it can.
But is the country better or worse for them going after you?
I think the country is really worse for what they've done. And I think you see that when you look at the poll numbers, when you see that almost $400 million has poured in since this horrible decision was made. That was a few days ago. Numbers that nobody's ever heard of in politics before. It's a great honor. The people of our country get it. They're very smart. Taken as a whole, I have to say, they're very smart. But it's been an honor being with you. It really has. And I think you'd be very proud of the job we do.
You have rallied people. I had people in my focus group the other night that said, I have not voted for Trump before. I have not been a Trump fan before. But I have donated to Trump because he has inspired me. I have donated to him, and I am voting for him now, and I have not before, but he has inspired me.
Actually, it's been a beautiful thing to watch. Thank you.
Mr. President, it's been an honor speaking with you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Well, welcome. Hopefully you have just been spending some time watching my interview with President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. And we're doing our first roundtable and analysis and focus group discussion after that interview. Hopefully it's the first of many. I want to introduce some good friends, colleagues and experts in their field. First is former prosecutor and News on Merritt Street anchor, Lonnie Coombs. We've been working together for many, many years out in LA. Also is my good friend who has left an indelible mark on the courtroom, Dallas trial lawyer for 50 years, Rod Phelan. He is an absolutely brilliant legal mind. He's really committed to justice. And finally, Greg Hartley. He is a body language expert and a member of Behavior Panel. And he's part of the family here at Merritt Street, so he's watching every one of you to see if you're doing anything. And it is absolutely brilliant and part of the Behavior Panel team. So I'll start with you four, and anybody can just jump in. You were all watching the interview, and I'm curious what your takeaways were from the interview. Anything jumped out at you? Because we're talking about someone that, according to the polls, may very likely resume the presidency of the United States soon, which would very likely put him back in a position of being the most powerful man on the planet in terms of politics, military power, and control. And I think this was an opportunity to have a look at him like we don't often see. So I'm just curious what your takeaways were.
Well, for me, right off, your relationship was clear that you had a relationship with him, that you could talk to him in a way a lot of people may not be able to. And that chemistry matters. You know, Jung, the famous psychologist, once said that no two people are the same after interaction. So we had to watch for that. And we could see when he understood that you were not there just to excoriate him and just go after him, that he made a good eye contact with you and started to pay attention and was like, okay, somebody gets what I'm saying at least.
All right, well, let's take a look. We have a clip of what you're pointing out.
You know, it was interesting when you called the other day about doing an interview. A lot of people want to do interviews, and I don't just agree to them very easily. But I've always had great respect for you. I watch your show, some of the real good ones. And
what do you see?
So if you watched him, we typically think when people are having an emotional thought, they look down and to their right, their eyes will go down and to the right. Think about the last wedding or funeral you went to, and that will happen. We see him do that when he's describing the problem. But as soon as he starts saying, somebody of your stature, watch him raise his head and make eye contact and show respect. That's powerful. Mm-hmm. That means who else is going to do that?
Right. You know, my position, just so you know, going into this kind of interview is I'm not a gotcha interviewer. I've never been a gotcha interviewer. I want to give people a chance to tell their story, say what they want to say, and then ask questions that I think the viewer would want asked. And if they don't answer them, then I'm going to ask them again. And if they go off on a 4th of July speech, then I'm going to say, well, that was a nice speech. Now answer my question. I do want my questions answered, but I give them a chance to say what they want to say. But then, and I told him at one point, I want people to get to know you because you're always campaigning. I don't want you campaigning. I want you to talk to us as a father and a husband and an individual. We want to know who you are, because he's got a speech that he gives, a stump speech that he gives. We've heard that. We want to hear some other things. And he was willing to do that.
Yeah, it showed when he made eye contact with you. From that point on, I watched him throughout the entire interview. He cared what you thought, and that's important because it gives a person the opportunity to actually show you a human side as well.
Yeah, and by the way, I have an invitation to President Biden to do the same thing. I have an interview scheduled with RFK Jr. For week after next to do the same thing. These are the 3 people that are involved. Maybe RFK Jr. as a spoiler, but he could swing this whole election one way or the other. So I'm talking to all the candidates that'll talk to me, so we'll see how that goes. Rod, what do you think?
Well, I wrote down 5 things, Phil. He is the toughest guy I have ever seen. I've tried cases, of course, and you're exhausted when you try a case as a lawyer. Just imagine if you're sitting there powerless, the client, the guy who's got the bullseye painted on him, your freedom's at stake, and you've got no control over what happens in the courtroom. You've got a hostile judge, you think the jury's hostile, your lawyers may or may not be doing what you want them to do, and Trump and he's getting it from all sides. That was one of 5 cases. I mean, and he just goes forward full steam ahead. Second, he wears a bullseye, and he gets shot at because he's so formidable. I mean, this guy is really a force. I mean, I said to somebody, you know, Phil kind of attended that interview as opposed to conducting it. And that's all you can do with a guy like Trump.
Well, we just signed professional bull riding here, and so I thought that was a warm-up for that.
Right.
Very good one.
3, he stays on message. He may wind around, but it's a familiar message, and he's going in the direction that he wants to go, trying to pull everybody with him. 4, he is a damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead guy. I mean, nothing gets in his way. He's going to go where he wants to go. You may not like where he's going, but you know where he's going, and he's going as hard as he can. And last, this guy wants revenge so bad he can taste it, but he knows better. And Phil, after letting him run, as Phil did throughout that interview, finally said, I want to see if I can get you where I want you. Will you take it back? Will you not be a vengeful president if you win? And he said, yes, I'm okay with that. That was really powerful. I hope he can stick to it.
What'd you think about the revenge point?
You know, Dr. Phil, I love to watch interviews, and I love to watch masterful interviews, and I'm always watching how the interviewer is getting to that information. I thought that this was the part of your interview that I just found fascinating, and I watched it over and over again. You literally laid out, okay, I am now going to ask you about retribution and revenge. I mean, you just put it out there to him. And I knew it was important to you because you literally came at it 4 different times. You kept coming. The first time you said, okay, what if? What if you just said, enough is enough? We're going to stop it now. And his response was, I'm okay with that sometimes. I'm sure in certain moments I wouldn't be. You know, and then he kind of went off, and then you came in the second time. And your second time was, every situation needs a hero. You're in a position to be the hero. Do you want to do that? Will you step up? And you're like constantly giving him that opportunity. And this time he kind of dodged it. He said, I think you'll be impressed. We need to unite and save the country. And then the next one you came, I mean, you were obviously prepared as you always are. You said, you know, there's research right now that revenge in this country is an addiction. We are literally feeding off it, and you could stop that cycle. And this time he said, well, you know, revenge is a strong word. Maybe we can have revenge through success. And then your last one, which I loved, was this quote from the Pope that I thought was so good. We are all brothers and sisters. Forgiveness is necessary. Otherwise, what will follow is not justice, but revenge. And then you followed up with, you don't have time to get even. You only have time to get it right. And he kind of pulled back again. He said, well, it does take time. And then he said, and I give him credit for this. He just said it to you. Sometimes revenge can be justified. So I have to be honest, you know, sometimes it is. And then you said, but is the country better or worse for them going after you? And it was very interesting to watch him. It was almost like he was thinking out loud as it was going on. And I wanted to ask you, because being in there is so different than just watching it. What were you feeling from him as you were working through this? What were the feelings you were getting from him, and how do you feel he actually ended up at the end of that?
Well, I thought there was a shift in the interview where he became very reflective, where he, you know, when I asked him why, you always talk about what you're doing. Why are you doing it? Is the cost to your family too much? And at that point, I thought things shifted, and he started getting, you know, really honest. And, you know, it kind of scared him at one point when he said, hey, I've seen you do this before. You know, just,
I know, he called you on it.
Yeah.
He's like, you break people down. You're not breaking me down.
Yeah, and I said, I don't want to. I'm just asking you the questions. And I think when he had to admit the country wasn't better off with them going after him, so it won't be better off with him going after them. And at that point, I think it landed with him, and I think he understood. And this is a process. This is a process. I think I think it's something that you don't just flip a switch and it changes like that. I think it's a process. It's a matter of who's in his ear and what they're talking about. But I think it was a quantum shift for him to even consider anything other than, you know, full speed ahead, get the bastards.
Yeah, I think that shows when he's talking to you, because he makes good eye contact, and you can see that he has to process. And only you were there with all your mirror neurons and that in the room can feel what you're feeling. But what we could see from out here is he makes eye contact, and it matters to him what you think, and that's important.
Yeah, I thought he made a shift, and we talked afterwards off camera and stuff, and he hears it. I mean, I think he honestly hears it. And do I think he's cured of his addiction to revenge? No, I don't. But I think for a single sit down, I think he made a major shift in his thinking. And look, he's not a dumb guy. And I think he understands, look, people don't want you running your own agenda. We want you running our agenda. And it's not you playing gotcha. And I think he'll understand. I think that will stick with him. And it doesn't mean he doesn't need hit again, hit again, hit again, hit again. And I think people around him are studying this interview very carefully. And if they're smart, I think the messaging will change. Yeah. What was the most significant thing you learned about Donald Trump watching that interview?
You know, Dr. Phil, I thought you were able to bring out a personal side of him. that I haven't seen before. And you had to work at it. I mean, he really has he's very strong, and he knows who he is, and he doesn't really care if other people don't like that or disagree with him. But you were able to get to him, and when he talked about his family, I think that was honest. I think that was a side of him he doesn't talk about very much. And then when you ask him about, the stress, how do you handle the stress in the darkest moments? He's not one to go deep. He's not one to really self-reflect, but he was honest about it. He said, you have to be strong, you have to be confident, you have to be smart. And then he said something I thought was interesting. You can kind of see it throughout his life. He said, you go through the bad moments. You're going to have the bad moments. And then they disappear. And then they disappear and you move on. And I thought that has stood him well through everything he's gone through. He also said, how do you handle the stress? I don't think about it. He's obviously a very good compartmentalizer. I don't think about it, and I have tremendous support from the people.
When he said that, I got this image of Scarlett O'Hara in my mind. I won't think about that today.
Yeah.
I'll think about that tomorrow.
And it was just that simple for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and that works for some people. It depends on what it is you're not thinking about.
Right.
If it's a nuclear threat, I'd rather you go ahead and think about that. But I think what he's saying is I do compartmentalize and move on. And when you've got that many balls in the air, then I think that's probably a way to maintain your sanity and not get overwhelmed.
Right.
And so it did make sense in that regard. What jumped out? What was your major takeaway? What, if anything, that you learned about him that you didn't know?
I have always thought he was smart, but not likable. I now think he is smart and engaging at a personal level. I think I would like the guy. He's very, very bright. He doesn't talk like you or I or other lawyers. He's not organized and here's my first point, here's my second point, but he's clear as a bell and very forceful. And I guess I kind of knew that, but it really registered with me as I watched him. And he's got a good sense of humor, a real good sense of humor. A little bit self-deprecating, usually not, but he is able to laugh at himself. So I thought better of him after watching him for an hour solid. I don't think I've ever watched the guy for an hour solid.
Well, that's the longest interview I think he's ever done. Mm-hmm. Nice. I really do. I think it's the longest interview he's ever done. Let me ask you as a group, and we'll get comments in a minute, but how many of you liked him better after the interview than before? Raise your hand real high. All right. How many of you liked him worse after the interview? Just two of you? All right. How many of you, it didn't change the way you felt about him one way or the other? Okay, that's 10, 12, okay. All right. What was your takeaway?
Yeah, agree. That strong, confident, smart. People tell you what they're thinking, and the words they stress tell you what they're thinking. He stressed those words, strong, confident, smart. I think it's what he values. He values that more than most other things, just listening to that. And I also think, that comes from a lot of years. And Doc, I always say the organism does what made the organism successful. And he's been in construction and all of those things for a lot of years, and strong, confident, smart are those watchwords for those kinds of businesses. So I listen to what people say and what they stress. If you pay attention, every one of you do the same thing, and you'll find that.
Mm-hmm. He's really focused on the fact that he is under attack a lot, has multiple cases against him. In fact, that's part of his rant, that's part of his spiel at the top. Does that suggest to you that this really bothers him?
Oh, yeah. And when he's ranting about this, when he's going on and on and on, he's using the basic Trump body language, the baseline we always say, where he's emphasizing with big movement everything he would normally do. And his eyes are drifting down to the right. And we'll see it in some videos when he does that, you'll see him doing this and ranting. And only when you brought him out of it a couple of times did he come back up and do normal eye movement and start moving his eyes around his head and looking for it. So he's irritated by it, clearly. It's really bothering him.
So you think this is getting to him more than he likes to show?
And if you see him when he walked, for example, when he walked out after the conviction, you can see he's just lifeless compared to Trump. His arms are hanging by his side. He looks deflated. I think it's just gotten to him on that level. Now, any of us it would. I mean, to your point, this is a tough guy, but any of us going through that period of time would feel that, especially when you talk to a trial attorney and they're saying that. Imagine what it's like to be the guy who has no capability to speak. So, yeah.
Right, right. Was there something you needed to hear from him that you didn't?
Well, I think that the gag order kept you from asking the kinds of questions I would have liked to hear him answer. I'm interested in why they did certain things in the trial, and was he pushing for this or holding them back on that? And you're never going to get the guy to answer that.
Well, and I didn't
not
want
just
to put him
because-
in a position to violate the gag order.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the gag order, it was, I don't think very many lawyers would let their client get up and say, well, look, here's the strategy. And I wanted these guys to do this, but they wouldn't do it. That's what I'm interested in. But there wasn't any chance that you were gonna-
Because the gag order is literally just saying he can't talk about the jurors or the witnesses or the court staff. He, as far as the gag order is concerned, he can talk about the case. He can talk about his campaign. So that doesn't limit. But I'm sure his counsel is saying, do not go there. This is under appeal. We don't need you talking about it. So
Yeah, there were lawyers in the room,
yeah, that makes sense.
just off camera. And
How many?
A lot.
Just curious.
Well, I don't know who all was lawyer and who weren't, but I think the ones that were holding their breath for a couple of hours and turning blue and kept going like this, I think those were lawyers
Yeah.
over there. And they, clearly he's got a sentencing hearing coming up on July 11th. And I think there's a real issue here that he's not going to show remorse.
That's right.
And he's going to go into this hearing with 10 contempt citations having been issued by this judge. He's going to go in not showing remorse and facing sentencing, which could be up to 4 years, right?
Right.
Highly unlikely.
Very.
But I think their concern is not just the gag order, but really complicating the situation further than what it already is. And I
Right.
think they're saying, look, you don't have to rub salt in the wounds
Right.
anymore. But and he would just kind of go off in that direction, and it really bothered them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've got to make it to the 11th, right? And get the sentencing and then take it from there. And I agree with you. That issue about him not showing remorse is an interesting issue in the justice system, right? When it gets to sentencing, they want the person to show remorse, saying, hey, I'm sorry. And it's very clear he's not going to do that. He's never going to do that. So how the judge handles that will be interesting.
Yeah, I asked him if his family tolerated him doing this or they wanted him to do this. And I thought it was very interesting that for the first time ever, I heard him talk about Barron and Melania and the fact that it was really taking a toll on them. And he said they don't talk about it a lot because they don't want to hurt me.
Yeah.
They think it would put pressure on me or hurt me if they talked about it hurting them. And so I really wondered if everybody's walking around kind of in a silo instead of really sitting down and talking about, hey, we're in this together, for fear of talking to each other about it.
Yeah. It was interesting. You asked two questions about his family. One was, do they tolerate it or they want you to? And is this taking a toll on them? Is the toll being taken on them not worth it? And both times he literally paused and he said, that's an interesting question. Like he hadn't really gone through that connection in his head. And I think it might be because the family sort of, they do separate it out. They don't want to bother him with their concerns. And so he was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me think about it,
Yeah, it's odd that he wouldn't have thought about that. Do you have a clip you wanted to show us?
Sure. The next one up, we can pull.
All right, what are you showing us?
This next one, I think, is where he's going to show some contempt and some sarcasm when he's talking about Biden. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look. What are we looking at?
Yeah. If you'll watch
By
him
the
when
way,
he starts
Biden
talking.
was totally exonerated. Now, I'm not sure I want that kind of an exoneration. They basically said he's incompetent to stay in trial, but he could be president.
what do we
So he's
Think of that.
animated. You see, he's doing all of this because it's about
he's not
Biden.
sharp enough
And then
to
you
know
notice
when we
he'll
got to know
do this
guy,
thing in
know
the side
that.
of his face where he does a
He's
sarcastic
incompetent.
smile, and then a
Basically,
half
they're
smile
saying,
rises. When half your
can't stay
face
in
rises,
trial
that's absolute contempt.
due to incompetence.
So we'll see him have
But
contempt
he
for
can run for
Biden or the
president.
situation
What's
he's in
going
as a
on?
result. Just pay attention.
What are we missing here?
Yeah, it makes everybody uncomfortable about it. Okay, and that's important because this is a unilateral expression.
Yes.
And this is the only emotion that is unilateral on the face. Explain
That's right.
that.
Yeah, so when we say unilateral, what we mean is one side of your face. When you smile, both sides of your face or eyes, they may be a little different, but when one side goes up, if somebody looks at you and does that, that's not positive, right? So that's the only one of the 7 universal emotions that we see that people actually have a unilateral side. And it is readable in every culture in the world. So it's just there. It's a muscle.
Think Dick Cheney.
Yeah, for sure. Good call.
He was the best example of that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And occasionally you'll see it when you're on one of these crime shows and somebody's trying to lie. One of your hosts is really good at shooting that shot over there and telling somebody, I don't believe you. It's really a powerful tool.
Yeah, okay. All right, and what's on the next clip?
Yeah, this last clip is simply his contact with you when you start to really pressure him and ask him questions about whether he's going to take revenge. Let's watch that one.
You can say, no,
I think
it ends here. It ends with me.
I think you'll be proud of the job we do. And the
So
word
if you're
revenge
watching
is
him
a
now,
very
see, he's
strong
feeling some
word, but
emotion. He's
maybe we
looking
have
down
revenge
into his
through
right. He's
success.
paying attention to
But
what's
that's
going
what
on in
I'd
his
like to
head.
see. I wanna
But then
see
he
the
comes
country
right back up and he
survive.
locks
Because
eyes with
country's not
Dr.
gonna
Phil,
survive
and
like
he's
this.
back down to that
And,
downright emotion. This is
and
showing
you
me
know
that
that
he
the
really cares what
expression, I
Dr.
think it's
Phil's
the
saying as he tries to do
greatest thing ever
that.
in
There's some
politics.
uncertainty in him about what he's going to do. You see that single shoulder rise? That's a good indicator of uncertainty. When a person does one shoulder, it's usually uncertainty. So I think, Doc, the answer is maybe.
I don't think I'm going to be able to remember all that stuff.
Yeah, it takes a little while.
Yeah, well, your wife will. That's the important thing. All right, and I'm really interested in questions or comments that you guys have about what you saw. You viewed the interview, and you heard what he had to say and what I had to say. And I want to break down the interview for you first in my mind. And as I've said, my goal is to talk to Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Robert Kennedy Jr., because I want everybody that watches Merit Street to hear what they have to say with the kind of questions that I have to ask. And with former President Trump last night, my goal, I've known him for a long time, not super well, but we've known each other for a long time. And I've been watching him. I knew that when he sat down, he's got certain things he's going to get said. And that's just the investment you have to make in the interview, because it's kind of like talking to a waiter and they've got the specials. They're going to give you those specials. And it doesn't matter what you want, they're going to give you those specials. And if you interrupt them on number 12 out of 15, they're going to start back at the top. So he's got things that he just feels like he needs to message. And he's going to go through those things. And I got some questions in there, even so, but that's going to have to happen. And then we started talking about what was going on. And the first time that I really thought we got into a meaningful conversation is I said, look, you do have good numbers, and numbers are what they are. There were good numbers out of the Trump administration. And my question to him, which started the second phase, was, with those good numbers, if everything is as good as you're saying, hell, you should be running unopposed. Who would not want all of that if you have these numbers here, these numbers here, these numbers here? So are you getting out-messaged? Or is the other side out messaging y'all? Are they out messaging you, or are they out messaging the Republicans? And he said, well, yes, no, maybe. I think it's just a pattern of the other side doesn't want to vote for anybody but the other side. We're that divided. What did you guys think about the fact that despite really good numbers, that we are that divided? Are Democrats out messaging Republicans? Are Republicans not sending the right message? And listen, I'm apolitical. I look at issues, not individuals. So I'm just curious what you guys think. From that part of the interview, what did you take away? Do they have good numbers? Are they playing games? What did you think about those messages? Just raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. I'm right here. In fact, why don't you stand up so I can find you a little easier, and just say your name and comment or question.
My name's Duff, and Dr. Phil, I wonder, in the polling, who are we polling? We've got half this nation that's probably paying no attention whatsoever to the trials and tribulations that are going on for this high office in the country. Mm-hmm. And I also wonder if, in fact, Mr. Trump doesn't win. You did good with him in the interview about this, and that's bringing him to a higher plateau. What about the other side? And then there again, half this country doesn't know the meaning of political weaponizing. Mm-hmm. We have a serious issue. How can we solve that?
So you think half of the country's not paying attention to what's going on in terms of the business of running the country?
Yes, I do.
How many of you agree with that? Really, you think that many people don't pay attention? Now, we have done man on the street interviews and asked a lot of people, when was the War of 1812? And they have no idea. I'm serious. They have no idea who was in the Spanish-American War. You ask them questions and they're like, they have no idea. And I don't know what they're paying attention to, because they are awake and they're vertical and they're walking up and down the street, but they don't, if they're not paying attention to obvious sort of things, obvious issues, what are they paying attention to? People that aren't tuned in, aren't dialed in, what are they paying attention to? Do you have a view on that? Hang on, we gotta bring you a microphone. You gotta stand up. Stand up and speak up.
Vanity. I think they're paying attention to like buzzwords and things that they can latch onto that are more closely associated to them. Like when they hear immigrations or people coming into the country or taxes, like that's why he kept like focusing on those buzzwords. I think that the normal person is only focused on those buzzwords. So I would agree that not that many people know what's going on because they're only concerned with the things that are closest to them.
Do we need to wake the rest of the people up?
Absolutely.
Is that, because I feel that way. I think we need to wake the rest of the people up. Yes, sir, right here.
I think what you got,
say your name.
Oh, Bill Camp.
Okay, Bill. Just your first name.
Longtime trial lawyer. You've been in trial services forever. You know, people just have a shorter focus span. And when you get into the different demographics, you've got, younger people, Gen Zs, that are only looking at their phone. They're only looking at that TikTok, or they're only looking at, whatever their recent podcast is. And I think a lot of people, you're seeing it, aren't following the legend news. They're following some individual podcast that's only their point of view. I think that's a problem.
Well, the statistics are very disturbing about the high percentage of young people who get 100% of their news from TikTok. Right. And it's not being fact-checked. I'll tell you what, we put up promos on the social media platforms about the interview for people to watch. And we submitted a promo to TikTok. And they said, well, we need to review this to see if it's consistent with community standards. And it was just the promo here. I mean, it wasn't saying let's go stomp baby kittens to death or anything. And usually, now I don't do a lot of this myself, it gets put up, but usually the review is like 10 seconds because they run it through like an algorithm or something and make sure it doesn't have something in it that shouldn't be there. And an hour later, which is usually like 2 seconds or 10 seconds, an hour later, the message came back rejected. They would not put it up. And which is really disturbing to me because it was just a news promo. It was just a news promo. And it's not like I'm a known conspiracy wacko or something. And I've got 7 or 8 million followers there, so it's not like I'm an unknown person to them. But they wouldn't put it up because it had Trump in it. They didn't even know if it was pro or con. It had Trump in it, they wouldn't put it up. That's concerning to me. But we put it on there because we wanted to get young people, hey, watch this and find out who this really is. Maybe you'll hate them. And so at least you'll know it'll be based on fact. So, but yes, ma'am, stand up, we'll get you a microphone.
Hi, I'm Karen. I was just thinking about when they ran the first time together, or the second time, and President Biden won. I have a lot of Republican friends and a lot of Democratic friends. I'm kind of neutral, but they talked about good versus evil, and I thought, well, we're not really in a Disney movie, so I don't understand. You may not like him, I get that, but now, 4 years later, the same people I know that have said these things say, I'm really upset with my 401k. I'm upset when I go to the grocery store, and they're all voting for Trump now. So and on the TikTok thing, I do get on TikTok, and most of the people I have followed off and on, their TikToks have been taken down if they have anything about Trump. And I just think this is bias, and so that doesn't help his case at all. They just see one side.
Yeah, does that bother you? That they're taking stuff down because it has that in there? What do you want to say?
My only thing is it doesn't allow us to see the genuine him. So watching your interview today, I think it actually gave me an interpretation that I've never had of him before. And us not seeing him more, it actually kind of hurts people on judging him. I guess if that's what the media wants to do, then they're doing a very good job at it.
Yeah, you bet. I believe it's the longest sit-down interview he's ever done. Certainly felt like it to me. No, I really appreciated him sitting down and talking with me, and I think we had a very civil discourse. I asked some hard questions, and I think got some fulsome answers. So I'm interested in hearing from you guys. So we'll start right here, and guys, go to the next person and be ready for them to go. Say your name and your comment.
I'm Callie, and I enjoyed the interview. I guess in relation to the last question about why people are not as invested, I wonder if it has to do with having less belief in democracy, and with some of the issues that former President Trump was raising with free and fair elections, trusting the media, and the judicial system. All of those are kind of pillars of democracy. Mm-hmm. And I was left wondering, I guess, how President Trump is going to address the flaws in our democracy.
Yeah. You know, another theory that I've heard is a lot of these Gen Zers have told me that they feel like they'll never be able to get where their parents are. They're not going to be able to earn enough money to own a home. They're not going to be able to get to that level. And so they've just kind of checked out. And if that's the case, we have a real problem. That shouldn't be the case. Okay, next, who has the microphone? Just take it to the next person. Both of you, hand it to somebody and be ready. We'll go to you next and then you next. Okay, go.
Hi, I'm Carmen, and you did phenomenal on your interview with Trump.
Thank you.
By the way, I just want to add that I am in Gen Z, and I'm actually engaged in the upcoming election, and I think there are many people in my age group that are as well. It's just they have a different way, including myself, have a different way of going about it in research. I guess the generations prior would go to, I would say, Fox 4, CNN, etc. But like some said, we go to Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, because we feel, as a whole, we feel like the streaming sources are biased. So we go to social media, even though there may be some bias in it as well. It gives us more. It gives more information for us to think more and to have our own outlook on it.
Do you ever check to see if something's true?
Yes.
Have you ever been to a library? It's a big building with books.
Yeah.
I mean, you actually have been to a library?
Yes.
Because most people don't. I haven't been to one in years. Because really, once you get it, electronically, it's difficult. Hand your mic to him, and then you go.
Dr. Phil, Mike Satterfield. I am asking, because the country is so polarized and divided, what is your hope from the interview that would help us make conscientious voting and objective voting without personality getting in the way of the platform and the issues you triumphantly pointed out to President Trump?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because, everybody says, get out and vote. And that's not what we need to do. We don't just need to get out and vote. We need to get out and make informed votes, not just vote. And this starts from the bottom up. And I mean, I don't care what the job is, even if it's your dog catcher. If you've got people in your neighborhood getting bit by dogs, then you need to kick that dog catcher to the curb and get somebody that's out there doing the job, taking care of the animals. And you can't know that if you don't check to find out. If you got a judge letting all the criminals go, then you need to get that judge off the bench and get another one up there that he or she will actually hold them accountable. Find out if people are doing their jobs. These are not legacies, they're privileges. And if they're not doing their job, we need to kick them to the curb and get somebody that will. That's how we need to do it. Yes, sir.
Dr. Phil, Mark, my question is more of, you're America's doctor, and so in watching Trump, he's really hard to follow. Like you said, he's a bull. And so the question is, if we're raised on it's not what you say, but how you say something, how are we to listen to him and not get polarized by his words or even triggered or bothered and really kind of get to the heart of what he's saying when he says the same thing 18 different times with one question?
Right. And, I think there's a loop that people get in because they think, this is what's getting the crowd riled up. But, there's a difference when people get into the polling booth and, people say politics are local. No, I don't think so. I think politics are personal. People get in and say, okay, what's this mean to my family? What's this mean to my ability to feed my children, to keep my roof over my family's head? And that's what these politicians need to figure out is people are asking, what's this going to do for me and my family? And that's not being selfish. You got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. I mean, look at Maslow's hierarchy. First thing is survival. And then you work up to self-actualization where you start taking care of other people. But you can't give away what you don't have. If you aren't healthy, if you don't have yourself taken care of, you can't reach out to somebody else. Yes, sir.
Great interview. Saw a side of him I hadn't seen before. My name is Keith.
I know your name's Keith. We've got to quit meeting this way.
Yes, sir. I know it. I'm that bad penny. I keep showing up,
Good.
So
just keep showing up.
I still have a problem with voting for somebody for president that is a convicted felon. And I don't know how to overcome that.
That is what?
That is a convicted felon.
Yeah.
That's trouble for me. I don't think that somebody in that capacity should be allowed to run for president, but the rules are the rules.
Well, that's right. And in fact, that goes to our first question on the poll. Let's look at that. The first question was asked, I would vote for a convicted felon for president of the United States. 91% say yes. And then Keith and a few stragglers say no. So 91% of the people say yes. And I don't know if that's because they think that's kind of a bogus conviction or if they think it's a white-collar conviction or something. That's something we need to drill down more on. But 91% of the people say they would. We'll see.
Most prisoners can't vote.
Right. Well, and you can't vote from prison. But actually, a convicted felon can't vote in Florida unless they're under New York law, which is interesting, then they can vote in Florida. So, yes, ma'am.
Hi, Nova. So I was here Monday, and I stated that I was formerly a Democrat, now Republican, and I'm still undecided. Great interview. I think you did a wonderful job getting him to be a little more personable. I thought it was really funny how he took your stats and was really like, oh, when you showed him the stats on everything, I was like, I wondered if you gave him a copy of that because he was so impressed with his numbers. But I am swayed. My mindset towards him since I saw the court, when y'all talked about the court hearing and all that, yes, I don't feel like that was fair for him. But at the same time, suck it up, Buttercup. That's what a lot of Americans go through as far as the indigent people. I mean, lots of innocent people get found guilty and they're not. Yeah. how I feel about when you talked about revenge. I feel like he had his fingers crossed in his pocket and said, you know. So that's concerning for me. I'm a little concerned about what he will do.
It's a process.
We know what the issues are in America.
Yeah.
What is his platform to take care of the issues? And I think he's getting overshadowed by all the court issues. Yes. Tell us immediately what your plan is. What's your new plan? Don't do what you did the last time.
Yes, sir. Go.
Preston Sklar, yes, sir. Between the uphill battle that Trump's going to be facing with regards to even getting inaugurated and then fixing the country, right? I think you hit a couple questions to him in that interview, which was specifically, how are we going to be the light on top of a shining hill? In order to be a hero, how are we going to represent America in the original values that it had? And what that specifically was, and I'll make this very plainly, and I think you agree with it, is that it was a God-given country, and the values that we have is God-given. So when we say that there's only one man who can do this, that there's only one plan that can happen, Dr. Phil, there's no man that can do this but God.
Go ahead. Say your name, Paul.
When I joined the military years ago, I wasn't concerned who the commander-in-chief was. My son just graduated, and he wants to join the Marines, but he said he wants to wait until the election is over. As a parent, what do you tell him?
Well, why does he want to wait till the election's over?
Because he wants a strong commander-in-chief.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's an illogical consideration, frankly.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
The U.S. military swears an oath to the Constitution of the United States, not to America. You're to protect the Constitution. That's always a noble cause, and we need people more than ever when we have a government that's shaky. So I would say join the military. He's not going to change the military. And we still always need people who want to put their lives on the line for all of our freedom. That's what I think.
But it's not an illogical concern. I mean, he's asking, that makes me think he's thinking. Yes. And we do need military, that's absolutely right. But I think you have a thoughtful young man on your hands.
He's his first time voting.
Yeah, that's good. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Takenya. So I have a two-part question. With the current state of the world, do you think a candidate can really get in there and turn it around, which is going to lead me to, what do you think the top qualities of these candidates are that would make them the best suitable candidate for the presidency?
Well, look, I'm the incurable optimist. So, I do think somebody can get in and turn it around. And what do I think is the top quality is somebody that can get in and build some real bridges and network among the people. You've got to be a consensus builder if you're going to get something done. And I really don't hope for it to be Democratic president, House, and Senate. I really don't hope for that. I don't hope for a Republican president, House, and Senate. Because if we don't have some checks and balances, oh my God, that would really make me nervous. But I do think that look, I grew up in sports. I grew up pretty poor. And so I grew up playing on teams. And there's something called headship, and there's something called leadership. And headship is when somebody is assigned to be a leader. Some authority comes down and says, this person's in charge. Leadership is when somebody builds a consensus, and that's where they earn the respect of those around them. People look to them, and it's, I think one of the biggest compliments Oprah ever paid me in the years that we worked together, and we're still very good friends, she said one time, if I'm ever in a burning building, I'm following him. She thought, that she said I was a clear thinker, and action-oriented. If she's ever caught in a burning building, I'm going to follow him. And I think that's the kind of person we need in our leadership. Somebody that people say, if we get in trouble, if we get in a problem internationally, or we have major disaster or whatever, we need somebody that can step up and say, hey, forget everything we were arguing about 10 minutes ago. We need to all get together right now and pull together, and you can trust me to do what I say and say what I do. And they know that that man or woman has the moral compass to do that. And right now, I'm not sure who that is, but those people exist. And so when you ask, what do I look for in a leader, that'd be who I look for. And I really learned that from sports. When a coach would appoint a captain to the team, but when the player's elected a captain of the offense or the defense or something, then that was the person that you all said, okay, this is the guy we want talking to the ref if there's a problem. This is somebody we want calling this play or that play or whatever. And that's where I learned leadership skills. Coaches used to say, boys, football teaches you about life. We all rolled our eyes. And then we got into life and found out that's really true. That's really true. I'm in my 23rd year of Dr. Phil, and when I left LA, I had the same 7 cameramen I started with, had the same director that I started with, same supervising producers I started with. It's because they all believe in what we're doing. The people that put this on tonight, they've been with me since day one, minute one. They all believe in what we're doing. Money is paid, but it's not about the money. They believe in what we're doing. And we want to make a difference. We want to have an impact. We're in a presidential election year. We want to have an impact. That's why we're doing this tonight.
Dr. Phil for president.
You couldn't give me that job. Yes, sir.
I guess the question I have is for you, really, what did you take away from that? Again, he speaks, one question can be answered 18 times. And again, it's very hard to determine which answer is the right one. It feels like he's always looking for the right edit, and editing himself. And so there's a lot of scattered thoughts. And so what did you take away from the interview, and what can we take away from what you took away?
Well, it was, as I said, it was in phases. Now, we've known each other a long time. Like I said, not well. We're not like, we don't barbecue on Sunday afternoons or anything. But if we were in the same restaurant together or something, he would come over and sit down, same with me. But he walked in the room and said, it's going to be the highest rated interview you've ever had. Joking around and stuff. And like I said, the first part, I let him do what he did. And then when I said, okay, I'm going to start asking some questions now. How do you deal with the stress of all of this? And what's the impact on your family? Is it worth it? When I started getting into those things, that's when I started seeing where he was in his mind, where he was in his heart, where he was in, just really his conviction and moral compass. And I came away with a feeling that he's been pretty battered and bruised through this process, but that he's convicted to do this. And, he comes across, in a way that sounds like braggadocious when he says, I know Putin, I know Xi, I know Zelensky, I know. And he does. He just feels the need to say it, but he really does. And I think they do respect/fear that he'll pull the financial rug out from under him. He'll do this, he'll do that. But I don't think that, as I was listening to him and when I talked to him about you need to not go on a revenge tour, a retribution tour here, I think he's still going to make noise about that, but like Hillary Clinton, lock her up, He never did. He made a lot of noise about it, but he never did. He never did anything to move in that direction. He says he's going to lock up everybody on January 6th that was moving there. I don't see that happening. I think I made a dent in him, and I'll probably talk to him again, and I'll keep going, and I think he'll think about that.
And if they're typically, if you accuse somebody, from what I know of psychology, if you call somebody a liar and they're not, they're mad and they're angry, and they do want that revenge, and they do want to make sure they set their record straight, and they do get animated. However, if you tell somebody that they're a liar and they're not, they'll laugh it off and be dismissive, and it's funny. So it seems like what was once subjective in our society is now objective, and now what is objective is subjective, and what we're seeing is a true response of somebody who's been attacked since 2015, and he's literally fighting because he is so mad at that perception.
Well, if you falsely accuse somebody, they're going to be hot under the collar from day one, minute one. Now, he may be, he's probably hit a fatigue level. He's been under attack for so long. But generally speaking, when somebody's falsely accused, they're going to be a hot tamale from the day one, minute one. They're not going to like it at all. Talk to me.
Sure. One of the things we know is when you falsely accuse somebody, their chin comes up, they expose all this weakness, they get defiant because they're angry at being wrongfully accused, and they're demonstrative. There's anger, there's all kinds of stuff going on. When a person laughs it off, you should be suspicious.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, last question here, and then we'll go. Oh, you had a comment? Go ahead, and then we'll start here.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you, it could have been my imagination.
Say your name.
Oh, Rita. But I felt like from the very beginning, I felt it was something I didn't expect from him. He seemed so grateful to you for taking the time to actually give him the time to interview him. And it surprised me, actually, because I don't think I've ever seen a side of Donald Trump that was ever humble before. But he actually looked at you with such gratitude that he felt like that you were on his side, and that he had someone who he respected, obviously, that you had given him your ear, and it was obvious that he thought that you were going to be fair and give him a fair shot at explaining what he had to say.
Well, if you think about most of the interviews that he does, he's either completely under attack or he's being sucked up to. And I don't do either one. And we've known each other a long time, and he knows I'm going to let him tell his story, but I am going to ask him the questions. Like when I asked him the why question, and he went off on one of his walkabouts, I came back to, okay, now answer my question. Why? Why do you subject yourself to this? Why do you do that? And that's when he kind of got scared and said, wait a minute, I've seen you do this before. If I cry, my whole career's over. Don't do that to me. I think he knows I'll give him a fair shot to tell it, and I think he knows that people trust me to ask fair questions, and he knows that the interview will travel, and it has traveled. It's millions and millions of impressions on the internet before it even aired, and they've deployed 8 or 9 bot farms already trying to poison the internet. I mean, people have gone to the dark web and they buy these bot farms and put thousands and thousands of fake accounts on the internet trying to poison people against the interview. So he knew this is not going to be insignificant. So it's not the normal noise. Yes, ma'am.
So I was looking at your
Say your name.
Ashley. I was looking at your inflation and how you showed him the piece of paper and the difference when he was in office versus Biden. But at the same time, I know a lot of people are going to ask me this, is that COVID was during that time. And so that played a part in the inflation. So what can you help me understand? How can we factor in COVID with the inflation numbers and how COVID has impacted that?
Well, you don't want to get me started on that. During COVID, the government printed and distributed $5.5 trillion to people that put $4.4 trillion of it in their savings and checking accounts, which means they didn't need it. When they print that much money, the money you had just went down in value. So if you had $100,000 saved away from working for years and years and years, it just became worth maybe $80,000. That's inflation. So, how does that cut one way or the other? And by the way, that started under Trump, not under Biden. So both of them have ownership in that. So it's very complex. Look, I can't add 2 and 2 and get 5 every time. I can read real fast and remember stuff really well, but I'm not good at math, and I don't tell people what to do with their 401k. I stay in my lane. But I do know that inflation has really gotten out of control. Don't you agree? And I think, I know with the Trump administration, taxes went down and tax revenue went up. Because you lower taxes, you stimulate business and it generates more revenue. And they haven't figured that out yet. I think I would vote for my dog if he did flat tax. I think it would stimulate the economy. It would be more money for everybody. So we'll see. Well, we're out of time. This will all go on. No, actually, Mar-a-Lago is closed. They closed down for the season down there, so they opened it up we had the ballroom to do all this with. It's a beautiful place. It's certainly worth more than $18 million, which they alleged in one of the trials. It's probably worth, seriously, it's got to be worth several $100 million. That's crazy. I've been there several times on business and all, so. Yeah. I'm getting along pretty well. I'm enjoying what I do. Robin's back there. Say hi to Robin. So.
First live show.
Yeah, that's right. This was the first live show today. So you guys made it great. Thank you very much. We came in to the second. Exactly, to the second, right? That's perfect. That's right. All right, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it.